Welcome to the FE Insights podcast, a series of podcasts to bring professionals working in the field up to speed with the latest developments, presented by Safaraz Ali, Chief Executive of the national training provider, the Pathway Group.
Welcome to Further Education Podcast, FE Podcast, and where we talk about updates in terms of the sector. We have conversations and hopefully some suggestions and advice. Today I'm joined by a very close friend of mine and a guest from the Leicestershire area who's come and joined us in Birmingham, a chap called Steve O'Hare from SCLO Consulting, and we'll talk a little bit about Steve O'Hare and SCLO Consulting a little bit later on. In terms of FE Podcast and myself, I've been in the sector 21 years, 22 years, worked through the whole FEFC, the whole sort of LSC, and now with all the changes going on. So a bit of experience there. But one of the things that I'll say is experience is not the same as expertise. And this is the reason why we reach out to people who have expertise, who have knowledge and wisdom, who can assist us navigate in terms of the changes that are going on in the sector. And, we're here to promote the sector. We're here to promote the good within the sector. And also, more importantly, to work together and guide in terms of how what we need to be looking at and what what we need to be focusing on. In terms of this particular episode, it's our second episode. Last episode we were talking to Lindsay McCurdy, and we focused on the AEB adult education budget. This time we're going to be talking about ROAT, depending on how you pronounce it. ROATP, and we'll talk to our guest Steve in terms of how he pronounces it and talk a little bit about what is it, what are the changes, and so forth. So please welcome Steve.
Thank you, Saf.
Thank you. Let's have a little bit of a conversation in terms of who you are. I mean, obviously I know who you are and so forth. So a little bit about your background, Steve, and then we'll go into hopefully our discussion point.
Yeah, sure, no problem at all. And just firstly, thank you very much for inviting me along to number 2 in the podcast list. It's great to be invited. So so I said, I'm Steve O'Hare. I am the chief cook, bottle washer, and absolutely anything and everything to do with SCLO Consulting.
Yeah.
So my business, in terms of my support business for people within the FE sector, has been going since April 2018. So I've made it past my 3rd year anniversary.
Wow, fantastic.
Which is great. Most SME or small businesses, there's a 40% failure rate in the first year. So I'm feeling fairly happy about the world that we're still here talking.
Yeah,
in terms of my history and my track record, you edge me in terms of how long you've been in the sector. So I had to work this out earlier. So I think I'm 17 years. Or just about 17 years. Well, you might even have been 18 of being in the sector.
I think you're a lot younger than I am as well. So please,
yeah. So 18 years in the sector, and a bit like you just explained yourself there. That our sector isn't something that necessarily existed when you or I were at school. So it is something that's relatively new, particularly the independent world. It's not something that I knew anything about before I got into the business, essentially. It's been 18 years and it's been a roller coaster. In terms of sort of what I do now, the whole sort of tendering, bidding, looking at growth strategy, supporting activity onto government systems, government portals, government registers. I've been doing that roughly for about 14, 15 years. So the bulk of my time in the sector. But I think what was good in my journey was that part of actually being on the tools first. So actually being an employment advisor. That's what I started off as. Originally started off as an employer engagement advisor. Then managed a team of employment advisors on the old New Deal programme, and have delivered training and support and skills and a whole raft and range of things in the sector over that period of time.
So, in terms of the main topic of conversation, Steve, firstly, thank you for giving us a little bit of background to that, and we'll explore a little bit more later on. Yeah. But in terms of ROATP, ROTAP, ROAT, and so forth, firstly, how do you pronounce it first?
So I call it ROAPT.
ROAPT.
Yeah.
ROAPT.
So I go with ROAPT. Or we could just call it the register.
Register. So
Let's
this
stick
is
with the register.
So this is the register of apprenticeship training providers.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, and hope most of the audience is from the sector, but there will be some people who are new to the sector and some people who are interested. In simple terms, what is this register?
Okay, so essentially what it is it's a license to practice. What the Department for Education, the Education Skills Funding Agency, what they want to have is good quality provision out there. So ultimately, yes, larger employers pay a levy to be able to deliver apprenticeship training. And yes, it is their money because it's come from payroll and it's gone into that point. However, it is the governmental department's responsibility to make sure that it's spent, like any bit of public money, in an effective and good way. So the register is there to make sure that good quality organisations are able to access a substantial amount of money and work with learners of differing ages to deliver a high quality product.
So, for example, employers, they can register as well in terms
in terms of an organisation that could deliver training, it's not just it's for the whole marketplace. If you want to deliver an apprenticeship program, if you want to be an organisation that supports people through an apprenticeship, you need to be on the register. It's that license to practice. It's not something you can do without. It is probably the most business critical thing that you have to do.
Okay. So yeah, I think that was mainly for the audience that potentially may not have been in the sector, or you've got a lot of trainers and tutors who are in the sector, but they may not know some of these terms as well. So
exactly.
our audience isn't just leaders within the sector, people who who are up to date in terms of the managers and so forth, but it's also the people who are looking to move and develop up in the sector. So you've got a lot of tutors and admins and various other people who we also want to try
engage with
engage
and talk to.
That's right, as well, cool. and it's for that audience as well.
Sure.
So in terms of the conversations that leaders are having within the sector about ROTAP, what are the pitfalls? What are the issues? What's going on? And why is this? Why are we talking about this?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, it's as I said, it's business critical. Yeah. It's a really, really important thing from a leader's perspective. If you want to be part of this industry, part of this sector, you have to be on it. You have to be in it to win it. Yeah. So that's the key thing. And I think the second, third, or fourth parts of that is timing. Yeah. Obviously, we're sitting here in 2021 where we've been through a very, very bizarre period of history, and was the timing right? You could argue yes or no. And then thirdly, it's a big job. It's not a 5-minute activity. This is something that takes a substantial amount of time to do.
We're talking about a refresh that's happening. We're talking about basically being invited back onto the register. So there's going to be organisations who've been on the register for a number of years, and what the ESFA is doing is getting every single organisation to refresh, and they're going into in bite size and so forth. So
that's right. Yeah. So just to give some numbers, and I like to give people numbers, just to give a scale of this. So the register for to deliver any sort of training for the ESFA, it's been around for a long time. The current iteration of the Register of Apprenticeship Training Providers first came about in 2017. That was when it was first it was the end of 16, start of 17, in which it was actually announced, and it was it was a real shift change, and it embraced the period when we moved more towards the apprenticeship standards, the apprenticeship levy, all that side of things, where you would have organisations who were particularly interested in delivering apprenticeships and weren't necessarily interested in some of the other ESFA type activity. So that was when it was first launched. It was kind of a follow-on from another register, which was called ROTO. So that was the Register of Training Organisations. But this was the first time that actually there was a real focus on apprenticeship training. Okay. If we fast forward to the end of 2018, 2019, the ESFA made a real concerted effort to really try and drive up the quality of providers on the register. So in terms of where the register sits at the minute, or sits where it's sat before the 17th of May of this year, when it was all relaunched. And there was 2,158 organisations on the register. So clearly, we've been through a period of economic turbulence, and there'll be a significant number of organisations that may have gone by the wayside or are no longer in this market, which is, whenever there's a substantial shock to any system, there is always going to be some fallout. So part of the driver for the SFAs, ultimately to see who's there. So actually, who have we still got that's about, who's still delivering quality stuff? How are they adapting to the world in which we live in? So the way in which training has been delivered has changed a little bit. I'm sure everyone who's obviously listened to this podcasts were the online thing. They were the online thing, but now we're kind of online every day. So how are organisations delivering training in those manners? So ultimately, from the SFA's perspective, is making sure who they've got left is delivering good quality stuff.
Okay, fantastic.
And again, if we look at time as well, it's been 2 years. So it's been 2 years since the last register refresh was done. So actually, we're at a point now where we really need to see people are updating the systems, people are keeping on top of things, and people want to be in this marketplace.
Okay. In terms of you've touched on ROTO, Register of Training Organizations. So you had this register of training providers, register of training organizations. You had this alongside the apprenticeship training providers. And then you had some people who were on both, and then you had some individuals who were on one
or the other.
Or the other. And now we've had this ROTO that's been decommissioned in July of this year. There's nothing that's replacing it at this moment in time?
Not at this moment in time, but there is meant to be something coming. Now, when that is, I think the answer's in Westminster. But there will be something, because ultimately you have to sort of govern the quality of what you have. You can't just have I'm all for open market and market forces and all that lot. However, there still needs to be some element of quality, because ultimately we're talking about taxpayers' money, or money that needs to be spent in the right way. So you've got to ensure that you've got the right level of probity of organisation that's actually involved in the marketplace. So
with ROTO being decommissioned and we've not had anything that's replacing it, the bids that have been, some of the tenders and so forth, you've not had to have been on the register at all.
No.
So in terms of timescales, there's nothing at this moment in time that says that this is the timescale we're working to. So
not yet. No,
not
I'm sure. I'm sure that there's been a number of consultations. There's been a number of things that have gone out, and there will be something on that. I would be lying to say that I knew the answer. And as soon as we do, I guess that's our next podcast, isn't it?
That will be. And I know there's been a reshuffle as well in terms of the cabinet and some of the positions and so forth.
Always slows things down.
Which then has a knock-on effect in terms of timescales and so forth.
Absolutely. I think there's a really good example if we, talking about the wider market. So there was the European Social Fund bids that were due to be announced last week. They've now been put back to the end of October. So the whole bid time frame is shifted back a month. Which is disappointing for those in the sector wanting to start new projects and support learners in different ways. But ultimately there is a process that we have to go through as a country, and if we're signing off governmental money, it has to go through those processes. So there is invariably a delay when there is a change in cabinet.
So in terms of the ROTAP refresh, just going back, we're juggling from one to another, but just going back onto the ROTAP refresh, obviously we understand that it's there to drive up the quality of apprenticeships. It's there also to open up the market for others, but it's also at the same time, it's setting the bar in terms of the stringent sort of requirements for you to become an apprenticeship training provider.
Absolutely.
There is an expectation that this 2,158 is probably going to reduce in some aspects of it. There's been a lot of providers, a lot of companies that have registered, but they've not delivered.
Absolutely.
And that now is becoming a bigger thing in terms of delivery. You have to deliver, otherwise you're going to be taken off the register.
Yeah, that's correct.
But we've also had a marketplace where people are selling providers previously as well. So there's been a lot more awareness with the ESFA in terms of if there's any changes, you've got to go back and notify, and obviously there's been that. but there's going to be there's I think more people are now not willy-nilly, if I'll use that word, becoming an apprenticeship training provider, but they're now actually being a little bit more thinking, is this something that they want to do as part of their business, and is this the right thing for them to do?
Absolutely.
So how are you finding the marketplace in terms of the conversations, that whether they should register, whether they should refresh, whether this is something for them? Is there a change in terms of people's outlook?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we just need to just to clarify is for the refresh. It's only for organisations that are already on the register. There is another process for new entities to become apprenticeship providers, and that's got to be an employer-driven route. So actually, it's them working with an employer to identify a specific need that the current marketplace isn't responding to, or they can't get the quality of what they want, or they can't get the numbers that they want within an area. So the key thing with the refresh is actually that whole bit. If we just go back a couple of minutes, it's that whole bit of who do we have from 2 years ago that's still here, that's still delivering high quality stuff and can meet that level of stringency that we wish to have from the SFA's perspective. So in terms of that, there is still a demand for organisations who still want to get involved in the apprenticeship market. I just think at the minute it's a little bit challenging. I think if you are an employer who wants to start to deliver apprenticeship programs, and you are, particularly if you're a levy paying employer, the route to market, I'm not going to say it's easier, but the route to market is a little more clear. If you're a sort of a generalistic provider trying to get into the market, I think it's at this present time, you really need to have a niche. You really need to have a sector that isn't being supported sufficiently at the moment, or there isn't enough. There isn't enough there in that listing to support those areas. So. There is still that demand, and those that are on the register, ultimately, I think they want to be there. My clients and other things that I've done around it, there still is that huge drive to be part of the gang, so to speak. They still want to go to the party. And when I've done training sessions and stuff like that, I always say it's the VIP pass to the VIP area of the apprenticeship party, and people still want to be there. They still want to be involved in the apprenticeship market. It is a core component part of the economic recovery. So actually having, being in it is still a good thing to do.
You mentioned earlier on the fact that it is business critical for people who are operating in this area. It's and they have to get it right. For their livelihoods, for their organisation, reputation, and so forth. But we also know that organizations have got it wrong. They've had issues. And there are pitfalls. There are dangers. Talk to us a little bit about from your experience, your awareness of some of those, and obviously no specifics, but some of those areas in generalization. And also some of the things that providers who are maybe working on a refresh now need to be more aware of and more conscious of.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I think firstly, if you are a good organisation, you've got nothing to fear. As I said at the start, and I'm not going to lie, it's a big old job. It is a substantial piece of work that you need to undertake. So if we think about, and I've gone through 4 or 5 refreshes now, so actually might be 6, within the first sort of batch of organisations invited. One thing that there's certain areas where people just need to think about their processes, their internal activities to make sure that they align to the current activity. So if we go with one, and probably my biggest bugbear this week, and we're recording this at lunchtime on a Monday, so you can imagine this is number one in my mind at the minute, is the whole thing around business continuity. So apprenticeship continuity plans was something that was introduced in the last round, and it's something the ESFA have built on again. And that's all about looking after the learner. So they're really concerned, and there has been a few high-profile cases of providers going to the wall where learners haven't necessarily been looked after. So one of the key things that they've asked providers to do this time round is to think about what their contingency arrangements should the worst happen. And it's probably it's not the nicest thing to start off on, but it's it's the one thing that we need to consider. Because ultimately, we need to think about the learner. People get into this sector because they want to help people. That's one of the key things. So actually, what do you do? What is your plan should the worst happen? So before it was a bit like what happens when there's a global pandemic. So continuity plans have been tested to the max of late, whereas with this one, this is more about, how are you going to make sure that you continue to support learners through? There's a couple of key points in there all around, accessing portfolio, allowing learning to continue, transferring learners, communicating effectively with learners and their employers so they know what's happening. So the individual is looked after.
So is that a policy or is that just...
Yes, that's a written policy. So it's a written policy that...
And a plan in terms of...
So, I mean, there's different ways in which you can do it. Either you can have it as a piece of prose that describes how you do something, or you can have it as a table, almost like an action plan table of, if this happens, this is what we do.
Okay.
But again, it's that description of doing that.
Okay, and that would be generally good practice for any provider to really have.
Absolutely.
Anyway, regardless of the tick box for the rota.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. I mean, there are, as I said, there's a lot of good providers out there, but unfortunately, sometimes cash is king, and it only takes a couple of things to go wrong, and then I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but ultimately it can happen. So it's good. It's important to think about it, and again, just in the market, thinking about of who is important. That learner is important because they're the person that we're supporting through that journey.
Okay. Any others in terms of policies that are quite key or documentation that a provider needs to be extra sort of savvy or focus on in terms of getting that right?
Yeah, sure. So there's a few tweaks and changes. So one thing I'd say with this refresh, it's not a wholesale change. It is an evolution, not a revolution.
Okay.
So there were certain things before that were actually policies. So the SFA wanted to see a policy for employer engagement, for instance. Right. Now you just have to describe how you do employer engagement. Okay. Which for me is a far better fit than trying to describe a policy for how you go and talk to people or how you market your products. It doesn't, it's better that it's a couple of questions now that describes how you promote it, how you work with the employees, how you keep that employer at the centre of the journey with the learner. So actually that whole wrap round of the employer, the learner and the employer being critical. So that's a shift change. Similarly, there's a whole different piece on English and maths. So again, English and maths was about was a policy. So how do you do your English and maths assessment, which is is an assessment is an assessment. Now they want you to describe that assessment. Actually, what is it you're trying to achieve by doing that? And similarly, what is your... So we go back to that word continuity. So what's your continuity to make sure English and maths continues? Yeah. So again, if we look back over the last 18 months, that was an area that across the country there was challenges. So from the SFA's perspective, the kind of pressure testing where that is. There is also similarly a little bit more description around. They don't necessarily want to see your quality assurance process. They want to drive down in terms of a written response into what does your quality assurance policy cover? What are the key things that it covers? And then interestingly, how do you quality assure your quality assurance policy? Right. Yeah. So actually, your quality assurance measures. What are you doing with those on an annual basis? So how are you using your self-assessment report? How are you using your quality improvement plan to actually improve your processes? So we can always say, oh, we've got a policy and our quality is great, but actually, how do we know that that's still great? How we engage with best practice throughout the sector? How are we engaging with all the different bodies out there? So your Ofsted, your Department for Education, and all of those that sort of will bring something to the party in terms of that driving it forward and improving quality throughout.
Okay, and you said it's a fair amount of piece of work. I mean, just describe to us in terms of what's involved and and the effort that needs to go in. Yeah. Bearing in mind that you've said it's business critical, we've got to all get it right. So we can sort of get an idea of what is, how much work is there?
How much work is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of, it depends on you as an organisation.
Yeah.
So again, one thing, you can view it as good or bad, and it depends on where you are. So if you've had a recent Ofsted inspection, a recent Ofsted inspection in the last 3 years, and you've been graded as good or better, so good or outstanding, then there are elements you don't have to do, which makes absolute sense. Because ultimately there's been an external body has been into your organisation in the last couple of years and had a look at you and has seen that, well, actually you're doing this really well, and they've done far more delving down than you will do from completing a registration. So in terms of, we look at it in just in raw numbers. So worst case scenario for providers, you've got 24 questions to respond to, which is roughly, when you do your word counts and all of that, like, it's about 24 sides worth of writing. So I get paid to do that. So for me, it's kind of a business thing as usual for me. However, there'll be people that want to do this themselves because actually they know the answer, they know their business really well. So that's 24 sides isn't a 2-minute job.
No.
At best, you're going to write 3 or 4 sides a day. So you're probably looking at 5-6 days worth of writing a response. So it's as I said, it's a big job.
Yeah, when you're taking away from the business, and you're doing this alongside the business and so forth.
Absolutely.
So and not every organisation has the right sort of skill sets to also do that as well, because it is a skill, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously, I promote my business slightly, but that's ultimately what my business does. And if you've got a leaking tap at home, you don't try and necessarily fix it yourself. You phone a plumber.
Yeah.
Or if you want a wall building, you might have a trowel and some sand, but you don't necessarily make you a builder.
Yeah,
so actually, you're going. It's about having the
expertise
the
expertise, isn't it? The people who navigate this on a daily basis, who understand data and can understand the pitfalls and so forth. And it's good to have that expertise, that knowledge on your side. In terms of obviously you specifically, if we talk about yourself and your business, and again, congratulations on you taking the challenge of doing so, particularly when you've been in the sector as employed in a leadership capacity. You work with training providers, you work with business owners, and you talk about growth consulting and helping businesses to grow, and that's not just about tenders and bid writing and so forth. What else is how can an organisation be supported with an individual like yourself, and potentially what's there to gain for them to look outside and look at how they can grow their businesses, training providers and skills providers.
So I think the one thing I would always say with our marketplace is there's always opportunity. I've made a nice little business over the last 3 and a bit years because ultimately there is always opportunity, there is always something, and we work in an industry that's akin to governmental cycles. So every government has a cycle. There's a period when they come into office, they put their plans into place. There's a period that they leave office. There's a period that the new government comes in. So there is always that cyclical nature of change. So there's always something that's happening. There's always something that's evolving. So the key thing that businesses would get for working with someone like myself is that expertise of knowing what to bid for. I mean, that's probably the biggest number one challenge, is bidding for the right stuff. Because actually there is lots of opportunity. You can sometimes get a little bit woohoo and go for absolutely anything and everything. Whereas sometimes it can be more important to go for stuff that you can deliver and you can deliver well. Because if you win it once, you deliver it badly, you don't tend to win it again. So you've got to be really mindful as to, is this opportunity right for you? And a good growth consultant is doing the right sort of growth. Bad growth benefits no one.
So the key is really picking the things that, firstly, are not for you, and what's your thing. I mean, I took this doesn't help on a podcast, but for the people who are seeing this on the video, I just looked at what are the just in the last sort of 4 weeks, all the government updates and so forth, and you've got to read all of these, and you've got to digest it and understand it, and some of them then refer to you to other documents, and it's it is a full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you think to yourself, you know what, I've got to look through all of this. I've got to get all the updates. And if I'm subscribed to .gov.uk, and you get an update nearly every other day. And and to just navigate all of this, and not only is it just in terms of bids and funding, but also some of the changes that are happening in the sector. We're obviously going into a new year. It's just to keep yourself updated and keep yourself relevant and understanding what's going on. It's not an easy thing.
No, it's not. And ultimately, it is kind of knowledge is power. And we are in a sector which evolves. I don't think we ever really have a revolution. We always have an evolution all the time. And it's what you've described there is that almost continual evolution that we have. So, and you also have the challenge of, it's a little bit of today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper. Whereas if you sometimes not getting the most up to date information, you're a week or so behind, and something could have changed again. So working with people that understand the market and have that knowledge, it's really useful to tap into them. If they're looking at it all the time, I had a full-time job managing a team of 10 people who did this. This was something that for a big organisation in lots of different sub-markets of the FE sector, you had to do, because actually you needed to keep on top of that. You had to keep on top of your relationships in different areas. You had to really understand what's coming. You had to understand your pipeline of opportunity within there.
See, one of the things I've sort of experiencing more on a personal level is that some of the larger organisations out there where they relied a lot on in-house teams are also now having that hybrid where they have consultants where they can come in and they have these experts, and not just in terms of non-execs, not in terms of governors, but also in terms of actually consultancy on a specific project related. I'm talking about awarding organizations. I'm talking about some of the very large training providers out there, large colleges, where they feel the fact that the gig economy has got a bad reputation generally, but the fact that you're talking to people who live and breathe their expertise, and they can tap into that resource. It's not just about always in-house. And are you finding there's more and more of even the larger and the colleges and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got colleges and universities and larger providers, smaller providers. My client base is quite diverse. But they use me in different ways, and that's great. If they're with a larger provider with their own in-house team, there's certain things, and ROAP's quite a good example. Of someone who's lived and breathed it and gone through it, if someone's actually come and hold the hand, actually just walk them through it, and actually, have I fully understood this, and how almost being that critical friend of, just someone to come and sense check it. We've done this. Is this right? You've seen this before. Is this right? You've spoken to others. Is this right? And is that the challenge? And absolutely. There is more and more of it.
So it's not just about here's a piece of work, you go and do it. From end to end, it's about, okay, this is what we need, and understanding what that business need is, and then whether it's, as you said, that sense check, or whether it's it's guidance, and then you go and do the work, or whatever, signposting, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, myself and others in what I do, we'll offer a range of different things. So I'll do from the all singing, all dancing, do it for you, to the advise you how to do it, to be your friend to make sure you've done it right. So there's that whole thing, and that applies to other things in the sector like data management, ILR completion, quality assurance. Looking at how Ofsted operate, all of those different things that are important, sales management, sales systems, learner management activity, all of these things, if you again go right back of what we said before, you wouldn't necessarily try and get a bricklayer to fix your plumbing, and you get your plumber in to do your plumbing. So it's that that's the analogy that they have. So
Okay. I mean, ESFA subcontracting, I mean, that's a relationship which, it's a love and hate type relationship.
Absolutely.
It comes out of favour, it's in favour. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of have a brief discussion with you is at the moment that's a focus point at this point in time. And we spoke about AEB and how many providers were left out. There's a need, I think, for the market. If we talk about the skills sector as a whole, for us to have subcontractors in some element. And where do you see subcontracting in terms of the current marketplace with the ESFA? At the same time, you've got these combined authorities who have a slightly different stance in some cases. So ESFA may be saying, subcontracting, we don't want to go down that route. Combined authorities may be saying the fact that, as I said, one of the examples was the swaps, where you have to have a subcontracting framework. Where do you see it at this point in time? What advice would you give somebody who's a lead provider, who's probably won some money as well in terms of AEB or some other money, and maybe the colleges? And what advice could you give possibly somebody who's a training provider looking at working with lead providers in a general?
Sure. I mean, I've sat on both sides of the fence. And in terms of, if we start with that the lead provider, the contract holder, I mean, the question you should always ask yourself is, if you're subcontracting, why are you subcontracting? And I think there is a value to do it, but it's the value to do something you can't do, or to diversify your service offer and think about your customer at the end. So actually, who's your customer? And what, by subcontracting, how can I support my customer, whether that be a paying customer in terms of the ESFA, the LEPs, the devolved regions, an employer. It's just that bit. If we're bringing someone else to the party, what are they bringing? Are they going to bring something that helps that relationship and helps deliver a good quality product? So I think there still is that place. And if we go almost not quite one step beyond, but actually we move to like the world of DWP, which is still a lot of people in this sector, particularly those that deliver adult education budget type activity, are involved in the DWP world, and they love subcontracting. There's a government department 4 doors down in Westminster, that has a different view altogether. So I think it will go up and down, and the devolved economies, majority like it, some don't, but it's all about them making sure that they get the money to through the devolved authorities go into the the front line. I think that's the key thing, is what does it benefit the frontline service. In terms of the people looking to subcontract, certain things I think there's less, but then other things there'll be more. And again, it's just that keeping the faith as to being able to enter the market and get into that market and just keep that whole thing. I mean, one of the key things with subcontracting is relationship building. It's the one thing that it's not 100% upfront on a tender. I think it's something that you need to build a relationship with an organisation first, so actually they kind of get to know you a little bit, because ultimately the subcontracting law governance isn't the same as with for a governmental department. They're not bound by governmental rules. So it's particularly in private sector organisations. So it's a case of building that relationship, building that rapport, and actually you can, once you're in, you can build your business, you can build your activity organically rather than that continual tender cycle. So there's different ways of going to it, but it still has a part. But again, it comes back to almost like the polar opposite of what we said at the start. If you're going to offer to subcontract, what are you offering somebody? So what are you offering that's different from what they've already got? If you're just going to offer them something that they can do already, why are they going to pick you? So it's almost that whole thing of what can you offer that's different? What can you offer that they can't do? So that could be like a specific geography, access to a specific client group, a niche qualification that there's a sufficient demand for, or the setup costs for another organisation to get into a little bit prohibitive, that actually you're already set up, so actually why don't they come and work with you? So there's a range of different things, but it's thinking about what it is you're going to offer rather than just I want to do the same as they do. Just I want to have it my logo, not their logo.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is about trust, and you've got to build trust, and that happens over a period of time in terms of credibility and obviously competency and so forth. But it's also about being visible as well. So training providers need to be a bit more visible. They need to go out there and show what they're doing.
Yeah, that's it.
And differentiation is absolutely key in terms of that sort of competitive advantage, and what's our expertise, what do we do, and it's also getting known as a provider in a particular marketplace or a particular area, whether that's a geographical area or whether that's an area of skill, specific skills or an industry.
Yeah.
But I mean, this story of subcontracting probably will be. It's going to be different. Maybe in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, we'll have a conversation in 6 months, and it'll be different again.
It might be different. But one of the things that I am noticing is that the combined authorities have taken a slightly different stance, where they're more comfortable with provider subcontracting, particularly on sort of certain areas like swaps. WMCA was a specific provider that said, we're open to talking to providers, but we want to see a consortia. We want to see a consortium-based approach.
Yeah.
Similarly, you had GMCA who had a consortium-based approach. So it depends, I think, in terms of the commissioning people. So it's not one size fits all. ESFA may, decide the fact that the way combined authorities are doing things is the right way. We don't know.
Yeah, Again, it's with everything. There's multiple ways in which to do things. So.
Yeah.
It will continue to evolve and continue to change. So I think if you can play, depending on the size of your organisation, your organisational goals, playing both sides of the street isn't ever going to hurt. So actually keep yourself in certain areas, and having a direct delivery and a subcontract delivery approach, gives you different opportunities in different areas and helps you to build your business and build your footprint, and then also that whole corporate social responsibility of how do you sort of bring SMEs into that marketplace and keep SMEs in that marketplace.
And the key, as you said earlier on, is in terms of the lead provider, as long as they've got their rationale right. As long as they can justify the process, why they're doing it, what's the added value. There's no issues in terms of subcontracting as long as you're working within those thresholds and understanding and so forth. Obviously, we've got this 25% that the ESFA has put down as well in some aspects of it. But overall, if it can add value to your organisation, I think organisations need to be more open to it. So that's a positive thing in terms of some of the changes that are happening in terms of ESFA, subcontracting to combined authorities and subcontracting. I want to touch very, very briefly on qualification achievement rates because, you spoke about obviously the pandemic, COVID, learners at the heart of it. We've had a very, very unusual period where, before that QAR, qualification achievement rates, minimum levels of standard was something that, we were all much more conscious of, aware of. We were talking about it on a daily basis. That's slightly been parked. There's a chance that QAR rates will be shared with Ofsted and so forth, but it's not going to be something that providers will have to see.
You're not going to hang your hat on, are you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
absolutely.
So there's some changes there. Where are you seeing in terms of the marketplace, in terms of the discussions on QAR and apprenticeship standards and some of this? Is there a general tone in terms of a bit of relaxation?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with your point. It doesn't seem as important at the minute as perhaps it was, but give it 6 months, it will be number one on the talking point. I think it would be incredibly harsh to penalise an organisation because, say you worked in the hospitality sector, you probably lost your entire apprenticeship part in one go where people got made redundant. And that's not because your provision's good, bad or indifferent, it's because of market forces. Similarly, if you are like an adult education budget provider, but you do something that's hands-on, if you do a an engineering type thing or a construction based thing, you can't really make that an online type activity. It has to be some degree of people in a room. So I think it was absolutely right to deprioritise it short term. However, my view is it will be reprioritised as something that's critical and key going forward, because ultimately you're judged on, do people get through the course? You don't go on to go and get a qualification, and if you don't pass, it's like, oh, well, you nearly passed. Well, no, actually the provider needs to be judged on how successful they are with working with their cohorts of learners.
Okay, so in general terms, at the moment, what are the opportunities for say SME or any training provider out there, skills provider out there, who may not have been successful in terms of the AEB, who is going through, has got some apprenticeships, but is looking to grow. Where's the landscape? Is it positive, or are there opportunities? Generally, where's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, there are always opportunities. It just depends to a certain extent where you are in the country.
Yeah.
If you're in one of the devolved areas, that's all going to start coming around for reprocurement. Those contracts are 3 years old now, so actually they're getting to the point now where that's a whole. If we use the word refresh again, that's where there's a whole refresh of that AEB marketplace in those areas, and there'll be a shift change around that. So that's all due in the next year or so. We've got the replacement for ESF. So there's two things there. So firstly, there is always ESF underspend. So ESF monies have been given out. Again, we've had a period of challenge. So ultimately, there will be budgets that aren't spent. So actually, once the ESF, DWP, combined authorities, let's realise actually they've got some money spare. That's where new opportunities come, and that will come across the piece. And then that's going to evolve to the Shared Prosperity Fund. So that whole new Shared Prosperity Fund is what's going to replace ESF. Contracts need to be in place for March 23. So actually, if we think about a tender from where something goes out to when it starts being delivered, it's normally about a year, roughly, in terms of where all the process sort of starts. So that whole process is going to have to start very soon to get people through. Employers will start spending. We look in the jobs market. If you are an organisation who are on the register, you look at the number of job vacancies there are in the marketplace at the moment. There's plenty of opportunity for people to move into new careers. Therefore, that whole apprenticeship agenda will help drive that. If you are a grade 2 provider, there's going to be an opportunity soon to have a look at 16 to 18 apprenticeships. So there's a market entry element for that if that's something that you are interested in doing. That's due for how they're going to go about doing it. It's due to be launched in the next couple of weeks. So there is plenty of stuff. Again, don't just always think ESFA. We're in the FE market, but the FE market is a bit broader than that. But ultimately, we're there to support people, and we're there to support people to move on. So things like the Department of Work and Pensions have got a flexible support fund that's been relaunched.
Okay.
And a lot of that is about training people. Okay. It's about training people to do well. So actually, your FE type market, it's for you. It's how do you show somebody to do stuff, and actually those that have had the AEB budget compressed or haven't got an AEB allocation, actually some of the stuff that providers did through there, actually you can repurpose and reuse and look at the flexible support fund to be able to use that as a vehicle to be able to support the customers that you want to support. Okay,
fantastic, great, some great wisdom there, and that's your 3-year business plan, I think, for the next 3 years.
Well, that's it. I do try.
So that's the next 3 years. That's the next 3 years covered.
Yeah.
So, Steve, really appreciate your time here.
No, pleasure.
If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, wanted to speak to you, what obviously it's quite easy just to type your name into the search engine, but what's the best way?
Yeah. We're 2021, so however's best. So SCLO Consulting. Give us a quick Google. I am the only SCLO Consulting in England, so we're doing all right on that front. So by all means, there's a web form. Contact. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. So please, if you want to follow me and see other things that are going on in the market, I do try and do some. I do some thought leadership pieces of where things are and just give people a few ideas and things to think about. Please follow me on there, or drop me an email at steve.o'hare@scloconsulting.co.uk. And we can go from there if there's anything anybody wants to talk about.
And Steve, you also do quite a bit of work for the AELP as well, in terms of webinars and so forth. So you do a lot of work out there in terms of sharing your knowledge and so forth. So people probably may have come across you there. But again, Steve, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your nuggets that you've shared with us. This podcast is about sharing sort of advice, guidance, really share nuggets of gold, and this is about really getting that small sort of competitive advantage, try and get to a position where we can navigate and be better and do more. So much appreciate your contribution to this podcast, and potentially with the changes with the write-up and so forth, we may be meeting again very, very shortly.
Yeah, sure.
But thank you for that.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. In terms of the FE podcast, in terms of going forward, I mean, this is our second episode. We've had feedback from the first episode and really appreciate that. We are generally interested in guests who can come on board, like Steve today, who have got some insight, some knowledge that they want to contribute, and it is something that's from our perspective we're looking to grow. So it's further education. We're talking about adult skills. We're talking about work-based learning, welfare to work as well, and anybody who feels that they've got something to say that gives value to the audience out there. The audience isn't just leaders within our sector, but it's also we have employers who also have listened in on the first podcast, and we're going to hopefully push the word out. We have created a website as well, which is fepodcast.co.uk. We're adding content, and we're also open to having people who are writing thought leadership pieces share that with us as well. So potentially that is also something that's available. I'll finish off by saying please do subscribe to us, and please share what we're doing with others, and thank you again for your support. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the latest news and insights from the further education sector. Safaraz Ali will be keeping his ear to the ground, and we'll be back soon with new developments and comment from some of the top professionals in the field.